Biden meets Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga to reaffirm the U.S.-Japan alliance and signal a united front against China. But do the U.S. and Japan see everything eye to eye? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell, and this episode is sponsored by Daily Peanut. The news can be a tough pill to swallow. That's why Daily Peanut gives you a daily dose of news in equal parts humor and substance. Japan and the U.S. have had very close relations since the end of World War II, ever since the U.S. nuked Japan. Twice. I can't believe Japan was able to get over having 2 atomic bombs dropped on them. I'm still holding a grudge over the final season of Game of Thrones, which arguably was an even bigger bomb. It probably helped that the U.S. sent General Douglas MacArthur to help rebuild Japan. And now, the U.S. and Japan are closer than a weeaboo and his anime body pillow. After World War II, the U.S. wanted Japan to be an ally. It was largely to counter the Soviet Union. And even after the fall of the Soviet Union, Japan continues to play a major role in America's presence in the Asia-Pacific. Japan is an important U.S. trading partner. It's a liberal democracy that generally shares American political values. And it's positioned in a very strategic location, just off the coast of 3 major U.S. military threats: China, Russia, and North Korea. So it makes sense that Japan is our best friend. And it also makes sense that the first foreign leader to meet President Biden in person is Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga. They met together last week at the White House to reaffirm the U.S.-Japan alliance and talk about pressing issues. Those issues include the coronavirus, climate change, research and development, North Korea, and hopefully, Godzilla. Oh, and China.
Yoshi, thank you for making the long trip to Washington.
Did he just call Yoshihide Suga Yoshi?
So Yoshi, you'll probably be seeing a lot more of me in the future.
Well, I sort of see the resemblance. Hopefully Biden won't sacrifice this Yoshi the way Mario always does. And yes, I have been making a lot of Super Mario jokes on the show lately. You're welcome. Biden and Suga say that they are partnering on sensitive supply chains, and that's huge news for several reasons. If you grew up in the 80s and 90s, then you'd remember how competitive the U.S. and Japan were back then. Japan had cutting-edge electronics and automobiles, while America had chocolate-fried chicken. The competition was too close to call. But since then, the 2 countries' collaboration on science and technology has not kept pace. To improve technology and innovation, Biden and Suga announced that they'll work together on 5G networks and next-generation mobile networks, launch a global digital connectivity partnership, strengthen collaboration and information exchange, cooperate on sensitive supply chains, including semiconductors, and reinforce collaboration and partnerships for quantum information science and technology. Once again, that's 5G global connectivity and quantum information science, for all you out there playing conspiracy theory bingo. The move is aimed at countering the threat of China in the field of economic security. China is, after all, a major concern for both the U.S. and Japan. China is also a major concern for Taiwan, Hong Kong, Uyghurs, Tibetans, Mongolians, Falun Gong, Christians, rights lawyers, party members, foreign... you know what, we don't have time to list them all. And when it comes to strengthening economic cooperation to counter China, the U.S. and Japan agree. But when it comes to tackling some of the more sensitive China issues, like Taiwan, things start to get awkward. I'll explain how after the break. Welcome back. During their meeting, Biden and Suga talked about China's influence.
We also had serious talks on China's influence over the peace and prosperity of the Indo-Pacific and the world at large. We agreed to oppose any attempts to change the status quo by force or coercion in the East and South China Seas and intimidation of others in the region.
Yeah, China shouldn't try to gain influence with intimidation. They should just do what they did with the NBA and gain influence with the promise of more money. China also did that with Disney, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Marriott, Delta, France, New Zealand, Germany. You know what, we don't have the time to list them all. Biden Suga also released a joint statement stating that the US and Japan underscore the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait and encourage the peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues. They even shared concerns about human rights abuses in Hong Kong and Xinjiang. Because if anyone knows how terrible internment camps can be, it's the Japanese. Man, Japan is really good at getting over grudges. It's unusual for Japan to single out China as a common threat with the US. And it was also unusual for Japan to mention Taiwan. Japan has historically shied away from even mentioning Taiwan with the US because it wants to avoid antagonizing China. China is Japan's largest trading partner. Suga's comments on Taiwan this week were the most assertive from a Japanese leader since the 1970s. Though that may be the case, Suga was quick to note that he wouldn't give further details on it. Japan is still being cautious about antagonizing China too much.
I think overall Japan is not comfortable with this. I think it's deeply uncomfortable with being urged to take a stronger stance. They recognize that China, both economically, militarily, has a lot of ways, a lot of leverage that they can use to make things very uncomfortable for Japan.
There is unease in some Japanese policy circles about being too forward-leaning in countering China. It's a delicate situation. Right now, Japan is like a bull in a china shop, where the china might declare war and annihilate the bull. It's a lot easier to just let the US do the criticizing. Japan doesn't want military conflict with China. That's why they included the wording, encourage the peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues, meaning Taiwan issues. One professor notes that the statement shunned more specific language, like defend Taiwan, to avoid provoking China. They're using euphemisms to avoid conflict. It's kind of like when you say your friend's kid looks unique, when you really mean, ew, why does that thing have a unibrow? And Japan already angers China a lot. They bought some islands. It angered China. They visited a shrine. It angered China. They signed a fishing agreement. It angered China. This video right now pointing out how everything angers China. It angered China. Now it's all well and good to anger China when you're the US. #1 greatest country in the world, yeah! Or when you're the host of China Uncensored. #1 greatest YouTube channel critically examining China but based safely in New York, yeah! But when you're a group of islands just a few hundred miles across the sea, and China already has lots of missiles pointed at you, it's a little riskier. So it's no surprise that Prime Minister Yoshihide emphasized that stable relations with China are important for the peace and prosperity of the region and the international community. Yes, peace and prosperity for the region of Japan. In other words, Suga needs to delicately continue a policy of engagement because Japan is so reliant on good relations with China. But it's not China's navy that Japan fears. It's China's economic power. I'll explain after the break. Welcome back. Japan is China's third largest trading partner, and China is Japan's largest trading partner. China alone makes up 20% of Japan's trade. So there's a lot at stake for Japanese corporations, especially since a lot of them heavily rely on China not nuking them. Financially, I mean. The head of Uniqlo, for example, says that China is vital to his growth plans. Some Japanese businesses like Muji are even willing to downplay concerns over Xinjiang cotton. Oh no. You mean Muji's cute little toe socks might be made from cotton picked by ethnic slave labor? And Japanese companies are overlooking these atrocities because it's financially advantageous? Wow. Japan and America have a lot more in common than I thought. And that basically sums up Japan's attitude towards China. Japan doesn't like all the terrible things the Chinese Communist Party is doing to its own people and internationally. And they've said so, diplomatically. But in 2012, there was a dispute over some uninhabited islands in the East China Sea. As I mentioned earlier, the Japanese government bought some islands, and it angered China, because China also claims those islands. The Chinese regime's response was to encourage massive anti-Japanese protests across the country. It started out as a boycott. It escalated into just smashing everything Japanese. In the end, the damage cost over $100 million. And that was just inside China. China's government-supported boycott also damaged trade between the two countries for many years. It was more costly to Japan's economy than the 2011 tsunami. And that's why this month's U.S.-Japan meeting is so important. Strengthening the U.S.-Japan relationship, especially economic ties, allows Japan to be less vulnerable to China. With the U.S. by its side, Japan can be a slightly less timid bull in that China shop. And you know what's working because my favorite Chinese state-run media, the Global Times, says the U.S.-Japan alliance is endangering peace in Asia-Pacific. In other words, it's making Japan stronger. And that's probably a good thing, even if it angers China. And this episode is sponsored by Daily Peanut. If you want more daily news, and not just episodes like this 4 times a week, check out Daily Peanut. It's a bunch of fast, timely news stories selected for you and available to read on your phone, tablet, or computer. Okay, you're going to read it on your phone. Reading Daily Peanut is an easy way to filter out the noise and learn more about the world news that matters. Join more than 250,000 other readers. Education and entertainment delivered right to your inbox every morning. And the best part is, it's free. So sign up for Daily Peanut now. Use the link in the description below. I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.